On the pediatric ward, there are children whose minds and bodies are severely crippled. Marie is 10. Like the others on this ward, her retardation is profound. Many on this ward are blind, or deaf, or both. Many are spastic and cannot walk. Whether they will always be so is not known. What seems impossible in one time may become possible in another. The children are placed upon a heated floor and helped to crawl. Progress is made in small ways.
I prefer for my son to stay at home because he's not homeless. He has a home with his family, his brothers and sisters that live with him in his home. He has his own room.
And Michael, my brother, was the firstborn in the family. And the doctor told them that his needs were so intensive that my mother wouldn't be able to care for any additional children. Her 24 hours would be wrapped up with caring for him.
Going to a facility would cause him to mentally, spiritually die.
My understanding is that he lived his life in bed and just wasted away, and eventually died of pneumonia at the institution. And the only time I saw him was in his coffin at his funeral.
But some terrible things happened to some of his roommates. He was there for nearly 3 years, and at least 3 children that was in his room died while he was there.
I think a lot of these atrocities would go away. And I think that's an important thing that we need to focus on as we look at this startling question of children living and dying in nursing homes.
Why? Why does it take this kind of effort? Why? What is the problem with a system that I have to start off by making an appointment with an alderman in order to get to my state senator, in order to get something to happen to keep my son at home? Crazy.
Well, Medicaid was enacted during the Johnson administration in 1965. Medicaid became the primary payer of long-term care in the United States. So Medicaid has an institutional bias that it's required that every state must provide services to people in nursing homes, but it's optional for states to provide services in people's homes or in the community.
I think it's beneficial if you can do it to keep your children at home. Obviously, that's where they belong with their family, but there is help that is needed.
We were in a state of crisis, and the thought did cross my mind to have him somewhere other than home for a short amount of time. Meaning the thought crossed through my mind for a very short period of time. And I, of course, like many people, knew about nursing homes from elderly people, and it just didn't seem like the right thing to do, or something that I could live with, making that type of a decision.
I've been driving to Montgomery for 13 years, and I remember the very first time something came up and it didn't fit with our schedule or something, and I was going to miss going that day, and I just remember having a miserable, rotten day because I didn't go see Zach, and I felt horribly guilty, and just felt it was so wrong that I didn't make it that time. And then there were times I just didn't want to go. This is a long, boring drive, and it's a long, boring, emotional drive sometimes, and there are days I just didn't want to face it. I just didn't want to go see my son laying in that bed and try to be happy and try to be cheerful when I didn't feel happy and cheerful. He was 4 pounds 4 ounces when he was born. He was 19 inches long. He was born at 12:32 in the afternoon. I kept taking him to the doctor and saying something was wrong, and they kept saying he was fine and I shouldn't compare him to my older son. Third pediatrician I went to recommended that I go to a neurologist. I was frustrated and angry and immediately wanted answers. That's what prompted me to go to the hospital and get his medical records. And that's when I found out that he had been born blue and had oxygen for 10 minutes. And these are things they didn't tell me. They didn't tell my husband. They didn't tell anybody. And at this point, he was 6 months old. So she set us up with an appointment at Eggleston Children's Hospital, and they had a satellite office in Gwinnett where we lived, and we started to go to physical, occupational, and speech therapy. I either went during my lunch hour after work. My mom helped a lot. Maybe about 8 years old, he started having pneumonia a lot, and 1 year he had it 7 times, and we discovered that it was aspiration pneumonia, so when he ate, he was aspirating his food into his lungs, and it was causing pneumonia. And he weighed 30 pounds at 10 years old. Then the gastroenterologist examined him and said, obviously this child is malnourished. So the procedure that he decided to do was a Nissen fundoplication, which is where they wrap the top of the stomach around the bottom of the esophagus. So they twist it. And then they also put in the feeding tube. He started gaining about 1 pound a week, which was really great in a lot of ways, and also very difficult in a lot of ways because now that he started growing, he became harder to handle. His daycare didn't want to take him anymore, the same daycare he had been at his whole life, because they weren't comfortable with the feeding tube. I interviewed probably 4 or 5 other daycares. I put an ad in the paper. Me and my mom interviewed people who answered the ad in the paper. We found a woman who would keep Zach in her home, and I started taking him to her house, and about a week went by, and she called me at work one day and said, you have to come and get him, I can't do this. So I went to pick him up, and he was sitting in his little carrier on her porch with his bag next to him. And she opened her door and said, I'm sorry, and closed her door, and she was crying. And so I took Zach, and the boss I had at the time let me bring him to work because I didn't have anywhere to take him. And I did that for a while, and I found out about an organization called Parent to Parent of Georgia. I called them and I told them my situation, and I said, do you know of, some place that would do daycare for him, or, some kind of respite care? And they said, well, have you thought of placing him? And I said I didn't know that that was an option. I chose to look at Alabama first because of the location. It was fairly close. They told me, show up a couple of times when we're not expecting you, and I did.
Aristotle 384 to 322 BC. As to the exposure and rearing of children, let there be a law that no deformed child shall live. 1483 to 1546. Martin Luther denounced children and adults with mental retardation as filled with Satan. Luther advised they'd be drowned. In 1889, the Pennsylvania Training School for Feeble-Minded Children is the first known U.S. public institution to castrate children.
In recent years, the state of Alabama has challenged me on a couple times. One, a couple years ago, they came into our home and said that because of her severe need, if we ever felt we couldn't take care of her, that she would have to be institutionalized. I have always felt that I can take care of her. However, I have asked for support from the state. We never had night nursing before 2.5 years ago. I turned Demi every 15 to 20 minutes as she asked. And I did the ventilator, and I did the feeding tube. So the intensive care didn't allow me to work. It didn't allow me to go to college. It didn't allow me to further any of my personal goals. And so when I asked the state of Alabama for support and they continued to deny it, they said maybe we should consider institution.
I wonder how many children are in long-term care that if we had facilities like this, community supports, parents would never have placed them there to start with, because they're just beat down, tired, 24/7 with these jobs. We have to do a better job in this state and in this country of providing these supports for these families so these children are not housed in large institutional settings.
The only option presented by Medicaid was that she could be put into a nursing home, not with the skill base that she requires because she has a trach, but she could be in a nursing home and they would pay for that. But for us to keep her at home, they would not offer any financial assistance.
If we were flexible with the way that the dollars were allocated, that we could meet the needs of families who want to keep their children at home. And some of the things that I'd like to see would be if a family lives in an area which doesn't have many nurses who live close to them, that perhaps nurses could get mileage reimbursement to get to their home. We find that with the higher cost of gas that some nurses just aren't willing to travel to some locations, particularly in rural areas.
With Cornelius' diagnosis, Cornelius needs essentially 24/7 care. When I first met him, he had already left the nursing facility which he was, and Mom had already assumed care of him at home.
I'm a single mom taking care of Cornelius by myself. Cornelius was 13 when he had his first nursing institution visit. He went in for respite because I was not receiving service in the home. I was kept waiting for service to come in and start, and in between that, I think I got some service to come in and they stopped service again, so I had to take him back to the institution, which is Rosehaven.
What was happening at the nursing home, to my understanding, was he wasn't getting the proper care in terms of making sure that he didn't aspirate. I think he had a couple episodes of pneumonia. His seizures, they were getting uncontrolled. He was getting some, bed sores, that repeated bed sores and ulcers on his body. Mom assumed his care, and essentially Mom has dedicated her life to taking care of her son, as any mom would. This forces Mom to be there 24/7, turning him over every 2 hours to make sure that he doesn't get any ulcers, making sure that when he's fed, he's in a proper position and that he's swallowing it correctly, making sure his hygiene is adequate, making sure that he's taking all of his medications to try to prevent all these seizures.
I was told the doctor ordered visiting nurse to come out to check his wound, but no one came out. The bed was supposed to be in place, a special type of bed to prevent skin breakdown and etc. Right now, you still don't have the correct mattress on the bed.
I mean, air mattress, Hoyer lift.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, it has been. I think that's one of those things that I wish he would be able to get more of. Is some more visiting nurses, inpatient visits from some healthcare providers that be able to accommodate him. Nurses, antibiotics, blood draws that he may need, especially in his condition.
In 1842, the Georgia State Sanitarium opens in Milledgeville. It quickly grows to one of the largest in the world and saw high death rates from disease. In the 1960s, the Georgia State Sanitarium is renamed Central State Hospital. The facility warehouses 250 forgotten children who receive no treatment, therapy, nor education. Between 2002 and 2006, 115 patients in Georgia died under suspicious circumstances at 7 state-run hospitals. A 14-year-old girl is one of the victims.
Yes, I was. I was institutionalized. I was born with cerebral palsy in Corpus Christi, Texas. And when I was 3 years old, I had several surgeries to help me with sitting and moving, my mobility. And as a result of that, I was in intensive therapy. That's when I was put in the Ada Wilson Crippled Children's Hospital. That was the terminology back in 1963. And so I was there, like I said, from about the age of 3 to the age of 5. And I would live there during the week, and then I would go home.
The Chicago Tribune did an expose recently about Alden North and the deaths of about 13 children over about the last two years. One of the deaths was a child who apparently had a seizure. It's being investigated right now, fell off of his bed and was not found for I believe it was 6 hours. Well, by that time it was too late. The child was dead.
When you say about someone that they're not good enough or capable enough to live amongst us, it's a pretty powerful message of devaluing them. And that's why people in institutions are often treated as less than human. I mean, their institutionalization alone communicates that.
I think kids living in nursing facilities is horrible. I think it should not be allowed at all, because it took so much away from my life. It took, so much of my childhood that I wish I could experience, and I felt stuck. Like, oh God, I'm gonna be here for the rest of my life.
My name is Matthew Harp. I am 21 years old. At the age of 6, I was diagnosed with Leigh disease. This is a degenerative neurological disease. I can no longer walk and have trouble speaking. I have always lived at home with my family.
The first time I heard about Matthew was from an intake that came into our office. A caller calls in and speaks to one of our resource advocates, and they record basic information about the nature of the call. And this caller was an anonymous caller who was calling to say that a young person was living in a nursing facility and didn't belong there.
When I turned 21, my mom said she could not handle me anymore. She took me to Greenville, Georgia. She admitted me into a nursing home.
And she told me that we were going to go meet a young man who was living in a nursing facility in Meriwether County, She didn't have a whole lot of details then because she just met him recently, but she said that he was very young and very unhappy at the nursing facility and really wanted to move out, but he didn't know what resources he needed to tap into to be able to move out and to live on his own.
Matthew's story was very compelling because he's able to tell his own story, and when I first met him, he took me to his bedside table in the nursing facility, in a room that he shared with two other much older men, and he pulled out a sheet of paper that had the alphabet written on it, and he started pointing to each of the letters to spell out words to connect sentences, and so it was really apparent that he needed a communication device, and once we got those things rolling, the main thing he said was, "I want out of here," and I just knew how important it was for him to be out in the community, not living in a nursing facility.
He was the only young person at the nursing facility, and I think the only recreational kind of opportunities he had were playing bingo or rolling around the nursing home with his wheelchair.
That was the hardest decision of my life. We lived in a house where all the bedrooms were upstairs. All the kids' bedrooms were upstairs, and I, being a single mom, had to rely a lot on my children, my girls, to help me carry him up and down the stairs and to take him to the restroom and to shower him and get him in and out of the shower.
Well, the things that we found are very similar to what researchers across the country have found, and that is that it is a tremendously difficult decision for people to decide to place a child out of the home, and it almost always relates to some service, some support, some help that that person really needed that wasn't there when they needed it.
I had just gotten to the point where I was afraid for me, afraid for him, and afraid for any of the girls that were helping me, pick him up and move him, because it was getting to be the point it was dangerous. So I made the decision to contact a nursing home. I had tried, there's a couple of nursing homes close to our home. Nobody, there's waiting list. I'm still on the waiting list at the nursing home here in Peachtree City, and there's always a waiting list. So the only place we could take him was the nursing home that he's in now.
I am by far the youngest resident. This was a shocking difference from the home I was accustomed to. I was scared, sad, lonely, confused, and then very upset that my family sent me away, alone with a bunch of older people. I am very bored at this place, and I do not like the food. I have a great friend, Sherry Everett. I met her when she started volunteering up here. She was also put in this nursing home when she was 24, so she understands how I feel about being stuck here. Sherry lives out of the nursing home now, and we visit often. She helps keep my spirits up. I am working on getting out of here. The Georgia Advocacy Office has been a great helper in trying to get me out. I am hopeful that I won't be here very much longer.
In 1773, the first public hospital for the treatment of people considered insane or feeble-minded is built in Williamsburg, Virginia. It is called the Eastern Lunatic Asylum. The Panic of 1857 was caused by a nationwide economic depression. As a result of this financial downturn, families suddenly started putting their loved ones into institutions when they could no longer care for them at home. In 1874, members of the SPCA meet to advocate for the rights of children. They form the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, SPCC.
And I had hoped that if I initiated a divorce and filed for divorce, that it would shock my wife into realizing that she needed to make some changes in her patterns of behavior, and if she did make those changes, she'd have a lot more time with her children.
And we do know that if they get the right supports at the right time, respite care, personal assistance, therapies, job training, practical living skills training for the child so that they can see that this person is becoming more independent and self-reliant, then they have hope. They have optimism about their ability to meet the challenges that they never expected, but that they think they're going to get through. And if they believe that they can get through them, they persevere.
Some parents aren't able to cope mentally, financially, emotionally, and if those parents aren't able to cope, then they can't help those children. They would be a detriment to those children.
Had we maybe had a nanny, you know, or been rich enough to have someone to care for Brock, and she probably would have been fine with the whole situation from the first, but that's not our life, so.
Caregivers could come into the home and augment parental supports and help provide relief to families who face extraordinary responsibilities and also risks for breaking up. I mean, I'm personally aware of families whose children have intensive support needs, and one, you know, mom or dad says, I'm done, I'm leaving.
Josh was 4 and Zach was 2 when we got divorced. The main reason we got divorced is because he didn't want anything to do with Zach. And that was a big part of it. He wasn't a good dad to either child, but Zach was mine. Zach was mine. He never took him to therapy. He didn't take him to the doctors. If Zach was sick, I stayed home with Zach. He was mine. We were both 23 when we had Zach. We were 20 when we got married, 21 when we had Josh. He had told me one time if Zach had been a girl, it would have been easier, whatever that means. He had a very hard time accepting Zach, and he didn't. I think it was just he didn't know how to deal with him. He wasn't going to be a normal kid that he could, you know, I don't know, throw a football to or play with. I feel bad for him that he missed the experience of Zach and Josh, because Zach's been my greatest teacher, and that could have been the case for him as well if he would have opened up to that. When Tommy and I got divorced, I was relieved, because while we were married, it was like having 3 kids instead of just 2, and because I did all the cooking, all the cleaning, took care of the kids, I did everything, and he had started drinking a lot as well. So when our marriage was ended, I was relieved that I didn't have to deal with that aspect any longer. Although I wanted him to be a part of their life, part of Josh and Zach's life, and I was really sad that he wasn't. So I admitted Zach October the 1st, 1997. I would go stay at the Days Inn. I'd go down after work on a Friday and visit with Zach and spend the night, and then go see him again in the morning before I left, and then go home. Did that many times. If I didn't go, it was very rare that I didn't. I would feel incredibly guilty, and I would have such a miserable time and cry and be upset that I ended up just not missing.
You gonna wake up, Zachary?
Come on, honey. Yeah.
When Zach first went to Father Walters, he was very depressed for about a year, as was I. Could these be any brighter? Because we were always together, and when he got a bath, I'd get in the tub with him because he could never sit up straight, and I had to hold him. And when I fed him, I sat him in my lap, and I fed him because a high chair, he'd fall out of it because he couldn't sit up straight. When I went to the store, I carried him, so we were touching a lot. Zach is 23 now, and currently he is completely bedridden. He, as far as mobility goes, he moves his right hand. He definitely knows who all of us are in his family.
So he starts making faces at me.
Parents who wish to keep their disabled children alive is seen as a psychiatric problem. The American Journal of Psychiatry, 1942. There's an accusing sense of obligation on the part of the parents towards the defective creature they have caused to be born. The American Journal of Psychiatry, 1942. Couples who have a disabled child report the experience strengthened their relationship and gave their life new meaning. Marie Hartwell Walker, ED, 2006.
What I've done as a single parent, and it's hard. It's really hard out there. And when people tell you, no, you can't do this, and no, we can't help you, and no, we don't have money for this, and no, we don't pay enough, the agency doesn't pay enough for this, enough for that, you get discouraged. And you go home and sit with your child, or put your child in some kind of program, or you try to pay out your pocket for that child. And I don't mean to get emotional, but this is how I feel, because it's not just my tears, it's other people's tears.
If I had a chance to meet with the governor, it would be helpful if he found a way to budget for help in the homes. I think a lot of times, I think it's beneficial if you can do it to keep your children at home. Obviously, that's where they belong with their family, but there is help that is needed. We need a nurse to help out daily, if possible. I would also appreciate if they could come and spend a day here in our home and realize that this is how our life is, and it doesn't stop. It's day after day after day. And maybe then they would realize that a little help is needed.
Sometimes parents just give up, or they don't know how to advocate for their children. We had to advocate a lot. I had to advocate a lot for services for Laura. I had to speak up and tell them what I wanted and what I didn't want. We had to call the House of Representatives when things didn't go well. We said, this needs to stop, and send letters and to get something accomplished.
I went through a training program called Partners in Policymaking, which was funded by the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities, and learned a lot of the skills that I needed to advocate lifelong for not only for my child but for others. So I've always felt really passionate about advocating and using those, putting those skills to use.
Why are you so invested in fighting for the rights of people who are not your own children? These are not your children. These are not your families. They're not even sometimes geographically next door to you. Why do you bother fighting for the rights of these kids? And my response is that we are a community. And we're not the kind of community that relies on being neighbors physically. We're the kind of community that relies on the idea that anyone can join the disability community at any time. So we fight for everyone because we're everywhere.
My name is S.C. Evans. My son named Cornelius Evans. And I have a special needs child with multiple diagnoses. A nonverbal, non-ambulatory, diagnosed with mitochondrial encephalopathy and Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, and also scoliosis of the back.
I was 7 years old at the time when Cornelius was born, and I can remember when he came home from the hospital. He seemed like the perfect little baby. My mom was quite skeptical about letting me hold him and stuff like that. Then months later, I could notice that he wasn't doing what a normal baby would do.
I moved in Kentucky after I graduated back in 2002, and I was actually working at a body shop for many years when I was up there. You know, I was up there for about 6 years, and I came back down this way, you know, to give my help with my brother and everything, because it was hard for my mother.
The first time that I met Ms. Evans was when she was bringing her son to Decatur Seminole Service Center, where I was employed. And at that time, she was really gaining a lot of knowledge of what services he was entitled to, how she could go about getting those services. But she was also at some roadblocks as far as she kind of knew more information than some of the agencies that she needed services from. So she and I together kind of researched what was needed for Cornelius and how she could go about getting those services.
Every provider that we wrote letters to, asked them to come out and asked them to be the provider. I was told no, they didn't have the qualified staff to come out, just didn't have the staff, period. They was too far away, or they just didn't have anybody to send out. I reported back to the region and told them, say, listen, now we find a provider, they're not willing to come out, we have contact every provider you all listed and gave me to contact. So what do I do from there? How do I get the help I need? Who's going to help me? Is I'm being forced to say, okay, let's just put Cornelius in an institution, give her my parental rights, and let you all just have it, and just walk away?
And now my mother has become disabled because she's been doing this for 15 years, and it has taken a toll on her. And one person alone can't do this work by themselves.
The most difficult part, to be honest with you, I think is, you know, lifting Cornelius in the house, in different rooms and this and that. You know, we need more room for him, you know, because of this tight area, and Cornelius is a big kid, you know.
So Ms. Evans asked, well, could her daughter become a provider of those services through what they call extenuating circumstances?
They don't smell good, Miss Mother. Yeah, I think they're good.
She asked, you know, what are the steps? What has to be done? And each time she was told it was something different. The procedure had changed. And even though there was no written policy that she could find or that was ever provided her, she then went through the state to appeal.
I think she's just going to wait more till she got to wash your hair already. Got to wash your hair and we'll call you ready to get it out.
And this took, I would think, about a year before it ever went to court. She had to hire an attorney, and it went through the Decatur County court system.
So to get them cleared, they thought I was going to take him in and put him in a nursing home. I said, my son is 15 years old. What do he look like being in a facility with 60, 80, 90-year-old people? I'm not going to do that.
Starting in 1956, doctors at the New York Willowbrook State School knowingly infect the hepatitis B virus into institutionalized children for scientific study. As of 2011, more than 4,000 young people under the age of 22 live in nursing homes, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Community care costs about $26,000 a year, while the state of Illinois spends $81,000 a year on each patient in nursing homes. University of Minnesota Training Center, 2010.
I would go home on the weekends, usually either Friday or Friday evening or Saturday morning. My dad would pick me up and take me home, and then coming back on Sunday evening. I had to be back in the hospital by 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. And like I said, it was 1963, and so the Sunday Bonanza was on. And if I saw the end of Bonanza, that means it was time for me to go back. And then when I was put in there, when I get there, my mother would tell me later that I was, the nurses would threaten with not letting me go back home during the weekend because I was so disruptive when I came back. And when a 3-year-old child came back, when he was away from his family, it was disruptive. So I'd cry, and 8 o'clock, most of the kids were already going in bed or, already there and getting ready to go to sleep. And so it was hard.
Falls Haven is the institution for individual. It was first for those said individual was it was they call us the clients first, and that was for them anyway. We was out there. There was a out there that was teaching us. Was a place for us to learn. It was a school, cafeterias. It was church, dining room, and all of that, and canteen. While we was out there, it was real bad.
I remember waiting for either my mom or my dad to come visit, and waiting for people to show up is still hard sometimes for people I care for. When are they going to show up? I still sometimes feel that same sense of waiting for my mom and dad to show up, even now. When people, they said they were going to be here, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Every once in a while, that thought, that flash of that, sitting there waiting for somebody to come visit you. So yeah, it still has affected me throughout it has. I deal better with it now. For a while, it was more difficult.
Also, the people behind walls and books. They are really suffering. Just died.
If you've had a heart attack caused by a completely blocked artery, another heart attack could be lurking, waiting to strike. A heart attack caused by a...
So how do you, you just have to push the door open?
Come on, Miss Emma. Excuse me.
I'm Sherry Everett. I live in Greenville, Georgia, which is in Meriwether County. So I was gonna go volunteer up there just to give me something to do. And when I did go that one time, I met Matt Harp. But after that, I just kept going, just to give him somebody to look forward to coming to see, because Mom doesn't come that much and Dad didn't. I mean, it was really sad, so I just started going up there. And I really stopped volunteering to the fact that I did anything else with anybody else, but I just went and visited him. Well, sometimes I would ride in my van, but I don't have a car. I don't have a car right now. It got hit by a deer. But anyway, even before I had a car, I would drive my chair from my house to the nursing home in this chair. And it takes me about 20 minutes to 25 minutes. And before I leave here, I have to call one of my caretakers and tell them I'm leaving, and they know how long it takes me. So if they don't hear back from me when I get to the nursing home, they know to come looking for me. By the time I got right here in my complex, I had a police come up, roll down the window and tell me that they've had calls that I was riding in the middle of the road. And I said, I'm sorry, sir, but I was not in the middle of the road.
Yeah, I heard it. Yeah, I know, but yeah. Can you turn them lights off now? Thank you. You want to go up front? I'm going to go in a minute, yeah. I don't know who you are.
He really likes his Xbox. He has an Xbox 360 in his room, so he went and showed me that and showed me how it worked.
The Children's Freedom Initiative started when we discovered that there were over 140 children in nursing facilities in Georgia. First, we just found a few kids. The Georgia Advocacy Office and our routine monitoring as the protection and advocacy system, and through getting complaints from other people in the community about kids being abused and neglected in facilities, we found that there were literally babies in nursing facilities. And so we actually asked the question, how many children in Georgia are institutionalized? And that turned out to be difficult to get the answer from the Department of Community Health.
Eric Jacobson was there at that point in time, Ruby Moore, and myself. At that point, those were the three members of the Administration on Developmental Disabilities Network in Georgia. And in the midst of a conversation, Ruby started to talk about this real issue, this real problem that they were facing, that she was facing along with her staff, of children in nursing homes.
People were very excited about figuring out how many kids there were institutionalized and doing the work we needed to do to bring them home.
HR 633 was an urging resolution that was passed in the 2005 legislative session, and it urged 5 state agencies to collaborate on moving children from congregate facilities to the community.
Together we can make Georgia and America better. We must work together.
The Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities has taken the role within the Children's Freedom Initiative as the public policy entity in terms of we were really pushing the resolution and working with legislators to get that resolution passed. We helped write it, and then working with legislators got it passed through the General Assembly.
We had a family a funeral, and his stepdad came to the funeral, and I, asked about the family and how Matthew was doing, and was told that he was doing good, but that they put him in a place in Warm Springs, and asked about it, and just had a bad feeling right then that so the next day my husband and my children, we went to go find him, and it took us a little while. He was not in Warm Springs, he was actually in Greenville at a nursing home, and we walked in and they told us which hallway to go to, and as we walked down the hallway we could see him, and he was in his wheelchair and was just had his head down, and it was just about make you cry. He just cried himself to sleep the first few months. I think they just stuck him in there, and he didn't know, why. He didn't know if he was going to be in there a month or for the rest of his life. Somebody here? Somebody here? Well, I guess a few months after we started visiting Matthew, his teacher from Starrs Mill High School, Arlene Crank, we were just trying to start this, finding anybody that could help or knew how to get help and how to get him out of here. So Matthew had his teacher's email address, so my husband emailed Arlene and, let her know that Matthew was in this place. And so she came down and she visited with him, and then she called the Georgia Advocacy Office and got that going.
Debbie, you're needed at the nurse station,
Debbie. The times that we've gone off and taken him back, he would hold the car door, when I go around to get him out, and hold the car door and just start crying and say, no, don't take me back. And so it's very hard to take him off and then to have to leave him there. So that's why we've worked so hard to do anything to help him make it easier while he's there, and then to try to get him out. Ma'am, you can make your own decisions. I know she checked you in here, but we're checking you out. You can check yourself out. Yeah. You can. It's not up to her.
Boss Trish said when he comes out, he does an assessment on Matthew and just figures out which waiver he might be eligible for. And then he has 3 days to write up that assessment, send it to their office in Augusta, and then Augusta sends it to Atlanta. And so how long, if he's eligible for SOURCE, which is what we want, because there's no waiting list to get those services, how quick could the turnaround be? She's like, they could do a move-out date of February 1st.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, now that would be, February 1st would be moving out date for Matthew, or that's when SOURCE could?
Yeah. No, he could move out to Keith's home and have SOURCE in the home. As long as Jay gets out there this week or early next week, and then, does the assessment, and as long as Matthew's eligible, which I don't think there'll be any question about that.
Right, yeah. Yeah, definitely the sooner the better, because, like I said, he was crying and upset the other night, and he is just desperate to get out. He's done. Tell her what he done. He told Sherry that, Sherry wanted me to tell you that he was so upset the other night. Somebody's taken some more of his stuff, that he said that he was ready to get himself kicked out of there. So he
figured out how he could get out. He could get kicked out.
Well, Matthew was running a fever in the nursing facility, and so they sent him to the hospital in LaGrange. And that's where we are now, about a week ago. And it turned out he had pneumonia, and so he's been in the hospital. And his friend Sherry called to let me know that he was in the facility, and we were so close to holding the transition plan meeting for his discharge to plan for him to move to his friend's house.
As of 2011, More than 5,500 people are waiting to receive Medicaid waivers from Georgia. As of 2011, 39 states have people with developmental disabilities waiting for services. As of 2011, in the U.S., more than 428,571 children and adults with disabilities are waiting to receive Medicaid waivers.
We're the new for Montgomery Children's Specialty Centers at Father Walters. So we'll go again this week.
Anything else today?
I am advocating for a waiver to bring him home. He's not close. I want to see him a lot more than I see him. Father Walters was purchased by Tutera Corporation out of Missouri. I was worried that, will they bring in their own staff? I didn't know if his care would improve or get worse. I didn't know if there would be any issue with him still staying there. Since he's 23 and the cutoff is 18, I was concerned that maybe the new company wouldn't be as cooperative as Father Walters had been with letting him stay until we get this waiver worked out in Georgia. The problem is that Zach has to be a Georgia resident to qualify for a waiver, and he's not. So Georgia Advocacy is trying to figure out if we can get around that to bring him home. Father Walters knows that if we had an alternative, we would use it. 13 years ago, these waivers didn't exist, and now they do, and I never knew. I'm hoping and praying that the waiver is going to come through. Somehow we can get around that residency requirement.
In 1959, a group of parents in Denmark organized a petition submitted to their government for better treatment of children with mental retardation. With the help of Niels Erik Bank Michelson, this becomes known as normalization. In 1972, President Nixon vetoes the Rehabilitation Act. Judy Heumann organizes a sit-in on Madison Avenue with more than 80 protesters and disability rights activists. The first People First convention was held in Oregon in October 1974 with 560 people attending. From this convention, the idea of self-advocacy began to grow and spread.
I finally got the state to agree to allow my children to become the paid caregiver of their minor brother, Cornelius Evans.
So you changed state policy?
I have broke boundaries in the policy. The policy can be, I wouldn't say broken, I would state that it can be revised.
The verdict was that a family member who was an adult but not a parent could provide the residential personal support services for Cornelius Evans. Yeah, I remember very specifically when we went to, it was in December near Christmas time, and when we went to the courthouse, and it was just, people had to come down from the state, of course, through DHR, and it was almost like, you know, did you really have to do all of this?
I had to take care of Cornelius, all of his doctor's appointments, just keep in contact on different doctor's appointments, different doctors he was seeing, you know, multiple doctors. He don't just have one diagnosis, he have multiple diagnoses. Also had two other children in school, and I wanted them to be so perfect, to make straight A's and B's in school. I didn't want them to bring home a C, and I wanted things just to be perfect for Cornelius and I.
I mean, watching her and growing up and everything, watching her to see how she well-mannered and take care of situations and do all this stuff and make sure Cornelius is well taken care of. She goes to church, she's a woman of God, and I feel like me seeing that in her has gave me the perseverance to want to be just like her.
I was just overwhelmed. I used to cry. I thought about committing suicide.
Hi, Marcia. This is Miss Evans calling. I'm sorry it took a little later for me to give you a call. I'm sorry. I lost my daughter on the 3rd of November. We buried her on the 11th this month. And I just wanted you to know, remember my daughter that also had an interview with you, Irv Morris Jr. I lost my daughter to cardiac arrest failure. Give me a call when you get a chance. Cornelius is doing fine at this time. So am I.
On December 23, 1907, Frank Garreau had a seizure and fell upon a hot radiator, suffering severe burns while left unattended at the Asylum for Feeble-Minded Children in Lincoln, Illinois. In 1980, Access Living is founded in Chicago to enable people with disabilities to live fully engaged and self-directed lives. As of 2012, in Illinois, there are 1,300 spots for children and young adults with developmental disabilities to receive services. There are almost 12,000 children left on the waiting list.
I believe that congregate care is a convenience for the adults and for the systems. And children and adults, people in general, need to live with people of their own choosing, or for children, the family that they're born into, or a family that is going to love them, a family that is going to love them unconditionally and permanently, whether that's a birth family or another family. And congregate care can't ever provide that and can't ever replace that. It will never be the same.
I got it. I got it in a huge way. I wouldn't put my dog in half of these institutions. I got it that my son's worst day at home would be better than his best day in a place like some of these.
It's basically a way to warehouse people away from society. And we don't know what to do with kids with severe disabilities, so we don't know how to take care of them. We don't know how to empower families to take care of them, so let's just hide them away. And the families don't want that, and the kids don't want that.
I do think anecdotally you hear quite often about how pneumonia ends up being the cause of death for an individual living in a nursing home, whether it is somebody who is younger or whether it's somebody who's elderly. My husband's grandmother had the same thing happen, had a cold. She was perfectly healthy. We saw her, she had a little bit of the sniffles, and then a couple days later we find out that she has pneumonia, is in the hospital, not expected to live. And it was something that happened so fast. And I think that seems to be the more interesting piece, is not only do individuals in congregate facilities seem to get pneumonia, it seems to be a more critical type of pneumonia, or something that individuals do not recover from at all, and if they do, it doesn't seem that they recover quickly.
Can you work very slowly? So just make sure you know the dialing the fax number.
We were waiting on a transitional meeting for him to go from the nursing home to Keith's house, was the original. But Matthew got sick and got pneumonia and went in the hospital for 2 weeks.
Once we realized that Matthew had been in a facility for 6 months, we applied for Money Follows the Person, which is a federal grant that encourages states to reduce their reliance on institutions and facilities and to transition people into communities with supports. And this program assigned Matthew a transition coordinator whose job it was to help him figure out which of the other Medicaid waivers would be best suited for him to support his needs in the community.
It was huge to see so many people there. There were 10, 15 people crammed into this tiny hospital room, and it was Matthew and his mom and dad and folks from Money Follows the Person, and Lynette Bragg was there to do some follow-up stuff. There was someone from the region, because Matthew was on the waiting list for the Now on the Comp waiver, so she was there. I was his planning list administrator. Katie and I were there. I mean, there's tons of people were there to support him and really try to figure out what he wanted, what was the best thing to do, and how we could all come together and make that happen the way he saw it happening.
You did, yeah. That's the quickest I've ever gotten to DMX.
You need to discharge orders today? No. You're more than welcome. So, is there anything I need to do?
You will, but
I signed the form.
You did, yeah. That's the quickest I've ever gotten to DMX.
You need to discharge orders today?
No. We do not. We do not.
Okay.
The equipment, the pulse oximeter, probably skilled nurse, you know, the things you typically order when folks go home, and we'll just work with your social worker on those things, and anything else you think that's going to be necessary. You just make sure we're covered as much as we can.
Okay.
And we can kick in with things over and above what.
The Money Follows the Person program is a demonstration program by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, in which states are granted money to transition people from nursing homes into the community. So what they do is they go into a nursing home, find people who are interested in leaving and are capable of thriving in the community, and offer them services that will allow them to do so.
We were not able to find any person, whether it be a person in the nursing home industry, whether it be a legislator, whether it be someone in the street, who could with a straight face say, I think it is a really good thing for a child to grow up in a nursing home. No one stands behind that statement. And I think starting on that and building worked for us.
I came out and spent a couple of hours with Matthew last week with Katie, and I gathered some information from him about kind of how things are now. And I want to run through that. Most of y'all have known Matthew all his life, but Zenobia and Katie and I are kind of new to Matthew, so this will just give us a starting point. Y'all come on in and make yourselves at home. We're just getting started.
The person-centered plan is a process we go through where we ask a set of questions, and the circle is kind of the group of people that you either have from friends or family or people that care about Matthew that he wanted to invite to help him think about his future.
He doesn't like for me to be off of work. He wants me to work 7 days, 24 hours.
Are you his age?
Yes.
Okay. I'm his ICWP case manager.
How you doing?
Okay.
I'm Zenobia.
Good. Nice.
And then the circle are people who commit to continue to meet to try to help him continue to have the things happen in his life that he would want to and have support to do that.
So the foundation for the Children's Freedom Initiative is that every child deserves a permanent, loving home. And it doesn't necessarily mean their biological family. It could be a foster family, an adoptive family, a shared family arrangement. Families can look a lot of different ways, but the home should be permanent and loving.
So I told her, I said, well, I'm planning on opening up a host home, you know. And we were talking about it, and I said, I said, I always got Matthew anyway, you know, and it'll probably be a little easier for you, you know, being that you have the kids and you have things going on in your life, that what if you think about me having Matthew to come live with me? And she was like, great, that'd be great. And I was like, that'll be great.
Ice, what it do?
Philadelphia is just about ready to kick this one away. Bush is deep, looking to return the kickoff.
I am Matthew Harp, and I am 22 years old, and I am the oldest of 6 children. I have 4 sisters and 1 baby brother. We have a large family. I love to play Xbox and watch movies. I also love to go shopping, and I love the Georgia Bulldogs. Go Dogs! I have a muscle disorder that affects my whole body. I was born with this disease. I have been in a wheelchair for about 12 years. I have a lot of special needs, and when I was 21 years old, I had to move into a nursing home because my mother and my sisters could not take care of me by themselves any longer. I did not like the nursing home. I did not like moving away from my family and school friends. I missed them very much because they could not visit me often enough. I was the youngest person in the nursing home. Most of the others were very old. I had only a few friends that would come and see me. I missed everyone very much, and I wanted to leave. I am not the only young person that had to be in a nursing home facility because of the need for assistance to themselves or their families. There are a lot of other people that have to live in a nursing home because they do not have anyone to help take care of them at home, so a facility is the only thing they know to do. I am very happy that I can live at home with my family, and that I have caregivers like Zenobia and Yolanda that take care of my needs. If it were not for the people at the Georgia Advocacy Office, like Katie and Lena, I would still be in the nursing home. I want to thank everyone that had a part in helping me to move back home and be near my friends and all of my family. I love them very much, and they are glad that I am back home too. I hope these programs, like Money Follows the Person, and the special waivers can help many others like me to be able to get out of the awful nursing homes and be able to live at home with their families or on their own. Thank you.
The U.S. Supreme Court affirmed the rights of individuals to live in their community. Olmstead versus LC and EW, 1999. Many children end up in nursing homes because of insufficient state resources. University of Minnesota, 2000. Between 2000 and 2011, 14 children died in one nursing home in Chicago. Chicago Tribune.
The Nevada Rehabilitation Center is closing as a result of state financial shortfalls. But as KSN's Jessa Lewis explains tonight, legislators are doing everything they can to help residents and the center's employees.
More than 200 employees will move in some way or another by the start of 2012. That's when Nevada's Rehabilitation Center is scheduled to close.
They're proceeding very deliberately with this alternate plan of constructing homes on the campus.
That's 8 or 9 group homes with 4 or 5 bedrooms and bathrooms each. About 8 people would live in each room. They will be built on land owned by the Rehabilitation Center just north of the current buildings.
I have some concerns that on 2 of our rehabilitation facilities that there is actually new building occurring on those campuses, and it's building group homes, so they will be smaller facilities, but they will still be on a campus that has historically been known as a place where people are set apart and prevented from integration into society.
Well, in 1999, the Supreme Court ruled in what is known as the Olmstead decision that the Americans with Disabilities Act applied to states providing long-term care to people with disabilities. And the ruling says that it's not enough to just provide institutional services when a person does not need to be in an institution. People have to be provided with long-term care services in the most integrated setting that's possible for them. So if they're capable of living in their home or in the community, the state is required to move them out of a nursing home and offer them alternatives to nursing home services.
What we're facing seems on a national level, people want to just completely do away with rehabilitation centers and throw people out into community options that really aren't ready to help these individuals. And that is very heartbreaking to me to know that a lot of our individuals really aren't ready to go to the community, but they're being forced to go. And I have to sit back and watch and get the phone calls from the parents telling me that they're not getting the supports they need and their life is in an absolute turned upside down mess.
We were told by them moving to Medicaid waiver program would give them $100 per person per head more funding directly to help them support and be able to still function. But that required the folks to move out into the community. Quote, community. The parents, the residents, no one else is asking us. We are not worried about the building, but everyone else from the outside is worried about the building setting. So our collaboration and agreement to go to group homes on the campus was to be able to qualify for Medicaid waiver, give them what they want, $100 per head per person, and let us stay together with these services. Let our people still have this help that they need because it gets nowhere else. And we were all in this best of worlds until the outside advocacy groups said, oh no, this is congregate living.
We created the American nursing home industry. There was no nursing home industry as we knew it before there was Medicaid money to pay for it. And one thing we've learned the hard way with medical care is if you provide generous reimbursement, people will provide the services. And that's what happened with nursing home care for children and adults. The money was there. When people had no alternative, they turned to the only alternative they had, and that was nursing home care.
On an individual basis, per person, it almost always costs less to provide somebody with long-term care in their home than it would in a nursing home on an individual basis. But nonetheless, the thought is that program costs will increase if home and community-based services are provided. Our research shows that program costs do not increase. Program costs often go down. They're not guaranteed to go down, but program costs often go down when states increase their non-institutional services.
There's nothing about an institution or a nursing home or a group home or a facility-based entity that can't be provided in somebody's own personal home. Children belong in homes with families. Adults belong in communities of their choice. And regardless of age, everybody should be empowered to choose who they feel will best support them.
I support community settings, if that's what's appropriate, if that's what works and the resident can do it. I support in-home settings. In fact, that's probably the best. If you can keep somebody at home, well, fine. And I support facilities. So the federal government is trying to ram a one-size-fits-all approach down everybody's throat. They don't mind throwing their weight and their money around. Sometimes they act like a schoolyard bully.
Virginia ranks high when it comes to personal income, 8th in the country, in fact. And yet our state government is at the bottom when it comes to funding the disabled. Good evening, everyone. I'm Angela Pellerano. Virginia ranks 46th in the country when it comes to funding the disabled, and it's been like that for years. Now, with budgets across the state getting cut, some are worried they will take a hit.
But the problem is that Medicaid will not pay. The structure of the law allows states to pay for all the services that kids and parents need to stay in the community. The problem is a lack of will on the part of state legislators and state governors to spend the dollars, and the short-sightedness of realizing they are spending the money for nursing home care, and they could spend those same dollars, and actually fewer dollars, to support children in the community. It's our inability to visualize a world where we all live in community with each other. It's about will and vision, not money.
And Father, you give me praise, Lord. Thank you for your mercy and your grace. Thank you for waking us up in our right minds. Use of all our limbs. Lord, I actually be with us and we go to it from our...
She's a very religious woman. Religious in the sense of the word that gives good meaning to the word, a real Christian lady.
Let your will be done. Lord, I ask that you just lead us and guide us in the way that you want us to go.
She was the walking epitome of someone who had a pure heart and put her money where her mouth is.
Meeting Miss Martin and her husband, I was quite taken aback because I never met a woman like that. She was appeared to be very nurturing, very loving. She had a big heart.
Yeah, okay, so I see y'all Saturday. Everybody has that. My 13-year-old, he's autistic. So he was in a program called CSAP. And he had his triannual, so we went up to get his testing done to qualify for him to stay in the program. Well, he blew the test away, and the lady asked me, was I working? And I told her not at the time. I was going to school, and she asked me what was I doing. And I told her, I was going to school for education. So she asked me if I wanted a job. So I was like, okay. So she gave me an application, and so I told her I would bring it back. But she insisted that I fill it out right then and there. So I had filled out the application, and that was a Tuesday. And that Wednesday, they called me in. And so I started working for CSAP. I was at St. Mary's Home for Disabled Children. And then a month or two after that, I got transferred. And that was November 2006. I got transferred to Lake Taylor Hospital, and that's when I met Qualee.
The siblings of Qualee were essentially removed from the guardian, who was the mother, but the biological mother. They were removed. We found out that she had a history of parental neglect, and especially medical neglect.
A protective order was in place for Qualee's mother to complete some services. And at that point, the court appointed a guardian ad litem, which is Sheila Drucker. She's an attorney for the children.
I left there in tears that day, and it takes a lot. I've practiced law a long time. I've seen a lot of things that are very heartbreaking, but this was one of the worst things I had ever seen. It was basically animals have a better life than this child had.
Virginia is actually ranked very low nationally for our fiscal effort towards developmental disability services for children and adults. It's 45th nationally for our fiscal effort. We have a very, very long waiting list for services. It's over 6,400 children and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities are on waiting lists.
Lake Taylor is a facility for adults, we thought. That's what I thought. That takes care of people who are wheelchair-bound, incompetent. And so at that point, when we found out, after questioning the mother, that the child has been there since birth, we went there to visit. And upon going there, we met with a social worker. I don't remember the social worker's name. And entering the building, they allowed us to go up on the ward where they had the children, because we were surprised that they had children up there. And if I recall, I just saw large cribs, steel cribs, not like the regular sized cribs you would see in someone's homes. It's almost like they almost look like like little jails.
The Department of Justice letter is essentially telling the Commonwealth of Virginia that they would like to see more of these patients in community centers rather than in our training centers. That's the juxt of the whole message. And I think the administration, the governor, the Secretary of Health heard that message loudly and clearly. And again, though, realistically, I don't think everybody can be transitioned. But we're going to do what we can to comply with the Department of Justice's concerns and move forward in that direction.
The Department of Justice sends letters to states when it sees their expenditure patterns on long-term care services being heavily biased in favor of institutions. States can choose to respond to those letters by instituting new programs of community services, or by expanding existing programs, or they can choose to wait until someone sues them, and in which case the Department of Justice will almost certainly side with the plaintiffs in those kinds of cases.
30 states have Olmstead plans, and 13 other states have plans, while not specifically said to be Olmstead plans, are put forward as saying that it is the state's way of complying with the Olmstead decision.
But I feel very much like we're in that post-Brown versus Board. Civil rights should be available to individuals, but for some reason in the United States we just keep dragging our feet. We can't seem to truly integrate people with disabilities into our life, even though they have so much to offer us.
And they took me up and showed me the kids that would be in our classroom and everything. And then they introduced Quali last because he was in his bed. He was in his bed, which is an enclosed bed, this zip closed and everything. And the nurse said, "You don't want to touch him. He's real messy. He's real messy." And when I looked at him stuff, he had mucus all over his face, and he was a mess, basically. He was real nasty and everything. But it was just something about him that I just fell in love with him immediately.
The only type of human touch that he got was from the staff.
And this is a child that was neglected in every sense of the word, because every child deserves a parent. Without that parent, without that family, they're not going to develop properly. They're not going to have any attachment bonding, which is a very critical phase in a child's life, which creates a whole host of problems later on if you don't have that attachment.
They would leave him in that crib with no TV on, no radio on, nothing, nobody interacting with him. And he had adapted to it, and he would just sit there in his crib just like this all the time.
He had basically been living in this ward for close to 6 years. And I don't believe, and Michelle Martins can tell you the answer to the question because she worked there, I don't think he went outside.
He never went outside. He didn't know what it was to play with a ball. He didn't know what it was to be in a car. He didn't know what it was to go out and go to school because everything was right there.
The ARC of Virginia created the phrase "a life like yours" to communicate to policymakers and the general public what it is that services and supports in the community help to provide for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. They help to provide a life just like anybody else.
The hospital took no steps to give him a better life.
For children, it's going to school just like anybody else. It's living with your family just like, you know, other children grow up and live with their family. It's having friends. It's having, enjoying a childhood just like anybody else.
And at that point, I believe Miss Martin worked with the school there. And she was the one that was still coming up and meeting with Kweli. She would take his laundry and wash it. She would bring toys to him.
I'm thinking to myself, well, if somebody's coming to do somebody's laundry, they really must love that person.
I got reprimanded, about the relationship with Kweli and everything. So when it came time for me to sign up for the next school year, I refused. I didn't want to be there anymore.
She was doing a lot of things for him in her capacity as a teacher's aide, but also during off hours, and that the hospital administration frowned upon that.
So I left. I didn't go back. I told him that in a year's time that, he will be living with me and I don't have to worry about anybody telling me what I can and I cannot do with Kweli, not knowing that it would come true.
She said she had been praying on this for over a month, and she knew when she walked out of that hospital that she was going to have custody somehow, but she didn't know how to do it.
I put it on the prayer list, like, Lord, whatever you want me to do. I didn't know what was going to happen with us, but I knew that I wanted him out of there.
And as if this was an undercover operation, and as if they were putting their jobs in jeopardy, they said to me, please don't tell anyone that we're calling you, but there is an employee that used to work here at the hospital that absolutely loves this child.
And one of the nurses called me from Lake Taylor, and she told me about, there's a lawyer, social workers and everything up here asking questions about Kweli and stuff, and the lawyer want to meet you and everything.
What ended up happening was we were able to set up a meeting between Kweli's mother and Ms. Martins. And even though she initially was resistant to the idea of relinquishing custody, I basically made it very clear to her that once Ms. Martins filed the custody petition with my assistance, and once I was appointed as Kweli's guardian ad litem, that I would be, in no uncertain terms, recommending that Ms. Martins be awarded full custody.
God set up the whole thing. God put all these people in our lives to ensure that that transition went smoothly.
These families have made a choice, the true choice, to invest in the lives of those young people, and it's just phenomenal to me. And when you see the smile on their face and the pride that they have as they watch these kids move through the developmental milestones.
And I knew that it was for me to have Kweli because God has a mission for him.
What I know and what I've seen is amazing things happen when kids have love in their life, when kids have real homes with real people around them, and they have an opportunity to give back, and they have an opportunity to be part of something and be a member of a family and be a member of a community.
God has a purpose for Kweli. There's something that God wants Kweli to do. And I'm a tool to help him accomplish what God wants him to
So I think it's that exchange that we all get by helping someone, not sitting passively as they sit and wallow away in a dark nursing facility, but being a part, an active part of the community. When you look in the eyes of these families, these are champions. The kids that they're serving are their kids and they're champions.
The Little City Foundation in Chicago provides innovative services including 24-hour emergency assistance to parents willing to foster and adopt children with special needs. Almost Home Kids helps medically fragile children live with families and stay comfortably in their homes while saving Illinois taxpayers millions of Medicaid dollars with a less costly community setting rather than acute care facilities. In 2004, the Children's Freedom Initiative, CFI, is formed in Georgia to get children out and prevent them from going into institutions or nursing facilities.